everybody, and welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. I am Kelly Hogan, and I am super excited today to have with me a guest that I've hung out with in person, but I've actually known in the internet world now for a decade. Since 2009, we have been interacting, and then we finally got to meet in person in Colorado this past summer. But I'm going to tell you that Amber O'Hearn has published papers on theoretical math, computer science, computational linguistics, cognitive psychology, evolution, and ketogenic diets. Amber O'Hearn is a brainiac, is what I'm trying to say. I've asked her to bring it down to my level because I try to keep it kind of like every man's carnivore. But I can't even tell y'all how excited I am. Hi, Amber. How are you?
I'm so glad to be here, Kelly. And yeah, we go way, way back. I mean, there was a long time when there was nothing much going on in the carnivore world. We were all just happily eating meat, and then suddenly the world found out about it, and and that has brought us back together. And I think that's really awesome.
I've always felt this kindred spirit with you. And when we met in person, it was like, oh, I knew I loved you.
Likewise.
So, Amber, we're going to touch on a subject that I feel like everyone is talking about right now. And I almost hesitate to do it because it's like, okay, here comes another fat versus protein, macro, lean, protein, fat. And it's like, oh, it's what's being talked about so much. And that's not new. We were talking about it in 2009. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not even new with the carnivore world. It's been protein wars have been a thing in the keto world since long before I came to it. And I was keto for a dozen years before I was carnivore. So yeah, it has a long history. But it seems to come up over and over again, I think for two reasons. One is that the science really isn't settled, and there are good arguments for one and the other. And also, people are different. So people like to generalize from their own experience. They say, this is what worked for me. That means it must be the thing that everybody needs. And that lacks a bit of nuance.
So you and I have been listening to and sharing some common podcasts and stuff like, hey, listen to this one about fat versus protein. Listen to this one. Oh my gosh, it's all over the place. I mean, like I can listen to one really intelligent podcast, and I try to listen as somebody who's really new, who doesn't know exactly what to eat. By this point, I'm not really looking to figure out how to eat. I've been doing this. I know what works for me. I'm just going to keep doing that forever and never until it were to stop working for me. I'm not looking for something new for myself, but there are people who start carnivore. Let's throw this out there. Some people start carnivore. They don't ever have to really think that much about what kind of meat they're eating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet we see some people who just succeed on just that whole eat meat, drink water. And I think you and I have definitely had years worth of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had some health struggles over the past couple years, but my diet wasn't triggered by a change in diet. And my diet before that for like at least 8 years was pretty much, I ate as much meat as I wanted when I wanted. And I got really good at figuring out what hunger was and just trusting my body to tell me when I wanted more fat, for example, or when I wanted more protein. And I never tried to manage that in a prescribed way. And doing that, I lost 60 pounds. I was the best health of my entire life. And so, there's this point where if someone had told me that, some people would do better to add a lot more fat or to scale back the fat, I would have said, you know what, that's just crazy, because all you have to do is get in tune with your body and stop trying to manage everything from the outside. And for the most part, I really do think that's still true. I think there may be some special cases, but trying to manage things from the outside is really counter to believing in your body as an organism that's made to work, right? Like no other animal on earth has to try to plan what food they have to eat. They get hungry for that food and it works out.
So what part of your journey made you start looking into this more carefully? Not just everybody eat as much meat and water as you want, follow your gut. Which is still what you say is like you just said is the basics of what you still think is true. But did something in your own journey start to make you think, let's look into this deeper?
Well, yes and no. The main reason that I got more interested in this kind of macro management, which I was really against for a long time, is from hearing other people's stories, actually. And I was actually very influenced by the clinic in Hungary. They used to be called Paleomedicina, and now they've changed their name to ICMNI. They do a all-meat or plant-free diet to treat patients who are very sick with a variety of diseases, especially autoimmune, but not restricted to. Although, as an aside, the number of diseases that might actually have an autoimmune component might be bigger than we actually think. But anyway, their approach, not only is it all meat, plant-free, but they are very strongly of the opinion that for it to work the best that it's going to work, it has to be highly ketogenic. So they're taking this 80% by calorie ratio, or 2-to-1 if you're going to talk in grams, to be therapeutic and as an essential component of the treatment of their patients. Most people who are on a carnivore diet, they're naturally going to be ketogenic to some degree, because even when you think about a carnivore diet that's not specifically targeted to be high fat, it's still going to be more fat than protein. It's still going to be mostly fat, even if you're just eating regular sort of medium fatty meat. I got interested in it in part because of the work of those doctors in Hungary, and in part because of meeting more and more people who really seemed to not get the full benefit of carnivore unless they were also combining it with this deep level of ketosis. Now that, of course, was being interested in more high fat. Before that point, I actually would have considered myself to be quite on the other side of the high protein spectrum. I still think that one of the big problems with keto is that when people are so focused on getting their ketones up, they sometimes don't eat enough protein. And I think that can actually be a much larger problem in the community at large than not getting enough fat.
So at some point in your decade of carnivore, I've heard you say that you were starting to feel better, maybe mentally, physically, in different ways, if you did raise your fat levels. Is that accurate?
Yes, so I started playing around after meeting the folks in Hungary. I actually got to visit them and got to eat the way they ate. It's surprisingly difficult to get really high fat on carnivore because you're not drowning your salad in oil, so you've got to just eat, plain animal fat, and that is not something that we here in this part of the world, and probably not in a lot of Europe either. We cut all the fat off of our meat, and so even if the meat is kind of marbled and fatty, the most of the meat that we eat doesn't have big chunks of just plain fat on it. So I did start playing around with that, and to be fully honest and have full disclosure, I gained a lot of weight in the last couple of years, and I don't completely understand why. I changed environments. I had maybe some different environmental exposures. I had 2 really bad bacterial infections from food poisoning. One of them was salmonella, and it was just dastardly. I highly recommend against getting salmonella. And it took a long time to recover from that. So it was like a couple weeks of being really, really sick. But then even after that, I never really regained my normal constitution, my normal digestive process for many, many, many months. And it was after that period that I gained even more weight, and very, very rapidly. And I still don't know why. Maybe it had something to do with gut damage from salmonella. Maybe it was something completely different. But in any case, that's when it kind of got personal, and I thought, well, maybe I should be playing around with different ways of eating. And I did find when I go to the effort to eat very high-fat carnivore, not only do I begin to lose weight more quickly, but my mood is absolutely incredibly better. And I think my mood was always very good on carnivore before, but over that year, I think it deteriorated in such a gradual way that I hadn't quite realized how much it affected me until I got back into that ketogenic zone. And then I would find myself literally skipping around and being cheery the way that I kind of consider myself normally to be. But I do find that eating very high fat can be difficult to sustain. And I think it maybe just takes a little practice. And I think it's almost like I've heard people say that they have a hard time staying on a low carb diet because they keep falling off the wagon. I didn't have that problem because I don't know why. I found a lot of good foods that I found extremely palatable, and I never had a problem staying on a low carb diet. But with very high fat carnivore, all it takes for me in the times that I've tried it is a day or two eating higher protein again, and it kind of revs up that protein appetite and completely knocks me off course, and then I have to kind of get back on track. I'm still in experimental stages with that, is what I'd have to say.
Yeah, I think I heard you say that when you eat really high amounts of protein, that it can raise the amount of ghrelin, which is what can make you feel hunger for more protein, right? That can kind of become a vicious cycle.
Absolutely. So I want to say, I know that there are people who eating very high protein and lower fat have said that it works for them, and being in the situation that we're in, I would never say to someone, well, you must be wrong. If they're saying it works for them, then I've got to believe them. But on the other hand, I know a lot of people who I've talked to over the last year, especially where this has come around again in a more strong way, who have said specifically that when they try to eat higher protein, their appetite just amps way up, and they have to eat more and more and more. And often that leads to weight gain. Not always. Some people are just sort of ravenous and aren't gaining weight, but they aren't feeling good. And I think that you're exactly right, that it has to do with when you're ingesting it, the hormones that are triggered when you eat protein that doesn't have a lot of fat in it are telling your body, this is the way we're going to get energy now. And so, we're going to start prioritizing protein for energy. And so it's a little bit complicated. Some people say, oh, well, I took my normal carnivore diet and then I added a bunch of fat to it and it didn't help me at all. But it might be the case that if you start off your meal with a higher protein, you're already telling your body how to process the fuel that's coming in. And so that's why some people are doing experiments that I think is working a lot better. Siobhan Huggins, for one, has done experiments with this kind of fat first protocol, where she'll eat as much meat fat, because she eats carnivore too, until the meat fat, she can't eat any more meat fat. And then there's like this second hunger, which is for protein, and she'll eat as much protein as she wants, or just like higher protein, so more like regular meat. And when she does it that way, the total amount of protein that she eats, it goes down, and her whole appetite goes down, and the volume of food that she eats goes down. So I think there's more to it than just throwing fat on top of what you're already eating to get that result, because of your body, the signals that you're telling your body as the food's coming in.
Could you say that you have seen some science that would support the idea of eating more fat on a carnivore diet? And have you also seen science, because I feel like I've also watched some videos where it sounds like science is also supporting the idea of a lower fat diet. Do you know what I mean? Where sometimes I feel like I've heard a scientific explanation for both ways.
Yeah, So I wouldn't say that exactly. I would say that the science, as far as I've seen it, seems to support for weight loss. If we're talking about weight
Right.
loss,
Yeah.
seems to support higher fat. The only evidence that the scientific kind of talking that I've seen around lowering fat is this idea that actually sounds like a reversion of thought back to the bad old calories in, calories out days, where people will say, oh, there's a certain amount of protein that you need for your basic functions, and then if you then they'll say you can use fat as a lever, and you can either get it off your body or you can add it in. And it sounds like it makes sense, but
Yeah.
the fact is that different people have different ability to access the fat that's on your body. So, and especially, so partly it's just limited by how much fat you have on your body. So in general terms, the more fat you have on your body, the more you can access just at one time. And the leaner you get, the more fat you will have to add in to make up for the fact that you can't get it out fast enough, even if it's there. The other thing is that those hormones that we talked about when you start to eat can have an effect on what your body decides to use. So it can actually make sense scientifically to say that if you eat something that's very high fat and a bit lower protein, it'll tell your body, oh, we're in fat burning mode, and it'll send the signals that allow the fat from your body to get used in a way that if you ate higher protein, it might just say, oh, we're going to use gluconeogenesis now, and we don't need to take that fat off the body. And so you could actually have a situation where, to a point, the more fat you eat, the more fat you're going to use.
All right, so I'm going to tell you where I am on this debate. For me personally, it's very day to day. And I know I've said this before. I wake up in the morning and I have days where I crave fat. It's like I know it from the minute I look in the fridge. I've got this tub of bacon fat. If I look at that tub and it looks appealing to me, it's just going to be I want some fat kind of day. And I'll put it on my burgers. I'll eat the fat on the steak first. I just want fat that day. And then I'll have days where really the sight of that bacon fat in my fridge almost makes me sick just to even think about it. I do not want it on there at all. It's the exact same tub. It's just that my body, I'm pretty in tune with what I want every day. So that's where I am.
That, I think, Kelly, is a perfect description of the zero carb zen, really. um, this is why, I think we get a lot of criticism for advocating for a way of eating where you just eat as much as you want. Of course, it doesn't solve every person's problems, but there are a lot of pros about having a way of life that does that. One of them is just, it's easier. Like, who wants to have to calculate everything they're eating?
Right.
But the other thing I think is that it really puts the control back where it should be, which is in your appetite regulation, right?
Yeah.
And when you start to do that, you start to actually develop an ability to tell the difference between fat hunger and protein hunger, which is something that I've never even heard of outside of the carnivore community, actually. And maybe not everyone even says it in words, but it's just like you said, like some days you just know you really have a craving for the higher fat, or you really have a craving for the leaner meat. And some days you're really, really hungry and you eat 3 steaks, and some days you're not all that hungry and you have like an egg and some bacon and you're good. and I think it's so valuable to develop this trusting relationship with your body, and your relationship to food, that I think it would be a big mistake to start imposing ideas from the outside before finding out that letting your body handle it isn't going to work, because I think for the majority of people it really is.
Beautifully said. I like that. I
Thank
do
you.
think the zeroing in on health community and the long-time carnivores who have this eat meat, drink water, simplistic sounding view catch a little bit of flack by people who I know they're trying to solve problems, and so they'll sometimes say, well, that doesn't work for everybody. Like, we know that. We know that just my approach of the exact macros that I'm eating may not work for you and may not work for Mary and Sam. We know
Yeah.
that. We know it's complicated. In fact, we know that it's so complicated that we would never set out to put a ratio on that. Like,
Right. Let alone one that is making claims about it being, this is what you do if you have fat to lose, and this is what you do if you don't have fat to lose, because frankly I've seen people lose better one way or the other and or at different times in their life or at different times in their age span.
yes, I'm going to be talking to Dana in 2 days from now. Dana Spencer.
Awesome.
She's gonna talk about how for several years of carnivore, a certain way she ate, and then it's like her body changed what it was asking for. She would never go on record now saying, now for sure, a carnivore needs to eat this amount of fat and this amount of lean, because even for her own body that changed.
Right.
So for me to be so naive that I'm going to now prescribe for all other carnivores the amount of fat that they should be eating when I don't know their health history, their autoimmune disorders. I don't know if they've starved themselves in the past or if they've come from keto where they had tons of fat in the past. There's so much there that I don't know, that when somebody says what percentage of my calories should be fat, it's like, oh, that's a deep question right there.
Surely. The other thing that harkens back, I think, to those days that I think we might have lost in the newer craze of carnivore is this focus on health, not just weight. Now, obviously, if you've got excess fat, that's usually an indication of a health problem. But that doesn't mean that targeting weight loss is the best way to target your health problems. And I think you know from a very personal level that sometimes your body needs to actually build before it can release. There are other people I know who seem to have lost their weight in kind of phases where some people would say, oh, you're having a stall, you have to like do something different, not feed yourself as much, or change things up, when actually the stall might just represent a time where your body is focusing on doing something that's not allowing your weight to come off. And there's something specific about that I learned. I'm going to mention Siobhan Huggins again because I'm a big fan of hers, and she helped me to understand this. So I think we've known for the whole time that I've known you, it's been a thing in the community that sometimes your body is going to be healing and fat loss might not be a priority at that time. But I've never really understood what that could mean. Like how your body's not choosing, oh, I'm going to lose weight now, oh, I'm going to heal now. But one thing that can come into play and may be part of this is actually insulin. Insulin is part of the immune response, and the immune response isn't just about fighting off infection, but it's also about repairing damage. And the immune system actually benefits from having higher insulin. And so when it's active, insulin levels can rise. And so for a lot of people, you might even see like type 2 diabetics who go on a keto diet and everything resolves, their blood sugar resolves, most of their weight falls off, all kinds of problems they were having go away, but that insulin level stays high for a really long time. It takes a lot longer. And so one thing that having high insulin does is make your fat stores less accessible. And so if you happen to be healing something, it seems to me quite plausible that your body won't be able to allow your insulin levels to get low enough to release fat while it's doing that. And in that case, if you're not getting as much fat off of your body, then actually the right thing to do, if all of that is correct, is to actually eat more fat, because your body needs to get it from somewhere and it can't get it from its own stores right now. So that may be one component of what's actually happening under the hood in these stalls, and they aren't necessarily something that you should be trying to fight, even though I know from a personal level how much we want to look our best and have reflected on the outside the beautiful people that we are on the inside.
Yeah, it is hard to wait it out. And I did gain weight when I first started carnivore because I think I was just really hungry. I had
Yeah.
not eaten well in a while, at least a couple of years. I was really low calorie, very low fat. And I think my body was just craving fat so much. And at some point, about 6 months after this crazy feeding frenzy of very high fat, my body did sort of like relax, where it was like, oh, okay, I don't feel like panic to eat right now, and everything doesn't have to be just covered in straight up fat. And then I started to lose weight. But I've been asked, well, do you think if you had cut back on the fat earlier than that, would you have started to lose quicker than 6 months? Well, I don't know, but I don't necessarily think so. I really think my body was telling me what it needed, and I think it probably just needed it for that long.
Yeah.
I've seen people who say either I couldn't lose weight on carnivore until I lowered fat because they suddenly wanted less. And then I've seen a lot of people say I couldn't lose weight on carnivore till I upped my fat because they started wanting more. I've
Mm-hmm.
just watched it, and you have too. I've watched it go so both ways that I think it is just really important to put it out into the universe that there isn't one set prescribed ratio. And if there was, I would be the first to make an episode saying something other than eat meat, drink water. I would love to throw that one out there. Like, so 70-30 ground beef in the grocery store, even though it says 70% lean, 30%, that's calorie wise closer to like 80% calories from fat.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know why you people at home are confused by that at all. Okay.
It's very tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if someone is struggling, maybe they could look at what they're eating. And if they feel like it's higher than 80%, can we throw 80% out there? If it's higher than 80% calories coming from fat, I don't know. I've heard some people say that if that's not working, you're already higher than 80, then maybe they could scale it back. And if they're a lot less than 80, maybe they could scale the fat up. Do you think that's solid advice? Do we even want to get that specific?
Well, it might depend on what they're suffering from. So, where I've seen the best results in the very high fat is people who have like gut issues, like Crohn's or other kinds of unresolved distress in the gut, and mood issues where the ketosis part can come into play really importantly, and really stubborn obesity, like morbidly obese individuals. I've heard from some of them that they really didn't get it going until they were higher fat. Whereas the people that I know who have done well doing leaner meat, for the most part, and there are exceptions on both sides, and that's why I don't have a grand unified theory yet.
Yeah.
But most of the people who I know who have done really well on lean are very athletic,
Okay.
even if that just means that they hike a lot or whatever, but also if they're a gym rat, and if they're already basically metabolically healthy and lean, but they just can't get that, if they're a guy, they just can't get to that 12% or whatever it is that they want. That often seems to work. But like I said, I've seen exceptions on both sides, so it's just a matter of what are you going to start with. I mean, you might start with which one sounds better to you, because, I mean, it's a little bit arbitrary.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe just in their minds think, okay, I feel like I would like to have more fat than I'm eating right now. I think most people could kind of intuitively think, is it likely that I'm eating a lot more fat than I need or a lot less? And maybe sort of gravitate, and okay, I'm going to consciously just try to nudge a little bit the other way to see if that makes me feel better, if it's making me look better. But I think, is my skin better, my hair better? There's a lot of ways to tell if what you're eating is working other than just a number on a scale. I hate it when we focus, all of our benefits of a diet are going to come down to what that scale says is really ridiculous to me.
Yeah, it's unhealthy.
It is. It can become such an obsession. But if many markers of health are indicating that when I add more fat to my diet, I'm feeling better, maybe that's the direction to go for a little while. Or you could just take it more of a day-by-day approach like I do, or even meal by meal. You don't have to even, maybe for breakfast, it feels great to put a ton of fat on my burgers, and by dinner, I don't really want it. I think there are a few different approaches that are actually all very good, that have worked for a lot of people. And so I think that's the message here today, Amber, is that no one really knows, and you are going to have to try it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And that is why Eat Meat, Drink Water is actually pretty brilliant, is because until you do that, eat meat and drink water personally, you don't know what your body needs. You can't feel it out. You can't add a little more or take away, more fat, less fat, until you have that base starting point. And we don't come at this from a place of that's going to work for everybody in those exact terms. We know, but how are you going to ever find out if you don't just start there?
Yeah, I would have to agree.
I'm so glad. I got Amber O'Hearn, who is just bloody brilliant, to say she agrees with me, so I'm probably right. Amber, I love you, and I know we just talked on the phone this week, and it's partly because when I have a thought, I do sometimes try to think, who are the most balanced, level-headed, intelligent voices that I see out there, and yours is always one of them. I really appreciate you coming on to talk through this with me. Even if we don't have it all figured out, I think it's worth even saying that much.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Kelly. I really like what you're doing, and I'm really honored to be on here, and I'm glad to be connecting with you again after all these years. And I think what you just said is so important. A lot of people would rather tell you they know the answer than tell you that it's complicated. And I get that, because sometimes people just want to be told what to do because it's reassuring and they're so tired of trying to figure out everything by themselves. But maybe instead what you can say is, I don't know if this is going to help you, but it does help some people.
Yeah. And just hearing you share that, a higher percentage did help bring back your happiness and you felt more like yourself, could lead someone to think, maybe I am eating too lean and I don't really feel my best. It's worth a shot, folks. Give it a try. If you feel worse, for heaven's sakes, cut back on it, right? We're not going to tell you that it's official, but it's worth a shot one way or the other. You'll never know until you try. Thank you, Amber, and I will talk to you very soon. All right, my dear.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So there's this chat that we've just had with Amber O'Hearn. I love me some Amber O'Hearn. She's clearly just so smart and has a lot of experience, and I love her. But in thinking about everything that I just heard with her, I wanted to bring in my friend Dana Spencer, who has been carnivore now for 12 years, right, Dana? Is that right, 12?
Yes.
For 12 years. And she and I have been friends for 10 years. And I think some of her experiences may be slightly different from what Amber has recently been experimenting with. And I'd like your advice and your way of going about thinking through things, Dana. So what I've asked her to do is to sit down and watch everything that Amber and I just talked about, and she was gracious enough to do that. And I would just love to hear your thoughts about it, Dana. Talk to us. Talk us through it.
the fat to protein thing was kind of based on history. And after reading Stefansson, Fat of the Land, in that book, they kind of came to the conclusion that the 80% fat, 20% lean by calories was average or desirable. In fact, pemmican is made in that ratio. That was what sustained people the best. So we kind of, back then, people were coming from low fat diets, and they were afraid of fat. So people needed fat. They were fat starved. And we kind of said, tried to get people to go towards the 80%. And we would encourage people to eat the 73, 27 ground beef is about 80%. That would give people an idea of how to get that and how they felt with that. But it does change with people. For some people, that's too much. But I think in the beginning, it's something people should try. You might be surprised eating that much fat, especially people who are sick with autoimmune disorders or anything. If you're unhealthy, your body really needs fat to repair all that and to heal. It seems that the higher fat really works well with people who are trying to heal things, especially brain injuries and mental issues. Fat seems to be important. But if after a year, I know it sounds like a long time, a year, to just plug along and hope for things, you really do need that, though. I mean, in the beginning, if somebody told me, oh, give it a year on your diet, and I'm like, yeah, right, 2 weeks was like a stretch to see no improvements. But after being on this diet for so long, the body really needs time to adjust and heal and get to a good healthy state. But if you're having trouble, you might want to look at what your ratios are right now. There's so many macro apps out there just to get an idea of where you are. If you're below, if you're in the 70 to 80% and you're not feeling well, try 60 to 70. Or if you're only in the 60 to 70%, try 70 to 80%. It's hard to stick to a certain percentage. You're going to be in a range. I ate close to 80% for 10 years. And then I started gaining weight about 6 years in. I had a lot of things going on in my life, stress, menopause, crazy things. I don't know why I gained the weight, but it was weird because you eat the same thing, you do the same thing, and all of a sudden you're gaining weight and nothing changed. So this just goes to show that weight gain and loss is hormonal. I, for whatever reason, punched in my numbers and realized I was eating a lot of fat, up to 80% most days. And I said, I'm going to try cutting out ribeyes because my husband eats ribeyes. And he needs them. He has no fat. And so he cooks. So I just ate what he ate. And I thought, I'm going to quit eating those because ribeye is the fattest thing you can eat. Especially the ones that we get, they're untrimmed. There's a lot of fat on them. Yeah. So I don't eat them anymore, maybe once or twice a month. I just switched my meats around. And that got me into the 60 to 70% fat. And I started losing that weight immediately. Like within the first week, I probably dropped 5 pounds just by cutting out the ribeyes. And I'm not eating lean meat. I just switched around from pork, tri-tip, New York steaks, chicken, fish. I just kind of rotate, and I've been losing weight for 3 years since then. I mean, I tried more fat. During when I was gaining, I tried everything. I tried fasting, of course. I tried all the tweaks you could do and just nothing worked. But for me, that just worked for whatever reason. And then the bear, I remembered him mentioning something about that when he got older. He had to cut back to about 60% as well for whatever reason. Back in the forum, 12 years ago, we had some older people who said they had to cut back on fat. And that's back when we were recommending the 80% in high fat. And after a while, they realized they had to pull back too. So even though I don't consider myself older, I guess I am. And that seems to be what happened with me. After 10 years, I had to cut back. But I do think it's important in the beginning of this this diet to be higher fat. I don't think it's going to work if you just start out and try to be lean, because people tend to think, oh, less fat, I'm going to lose more, because it's not healthy. Your hair will fall out. You won't go to the bathroom. Your skin will get dry. It's just, you have to learn how, you have to have the fat and learn how your body feels before you can decide if you need more or less. Like you some days you feel like you need more fat and other days you don't, and you just know it. And I'm at that point too, but it took years to learn that. So I think it's just, yeah.
Yes. So that now it is so intuitive for me, but I completely get why people, when they're first starting out, want us to give them a number. They want so bad.
Yeah.
Just give me a number. And it's hard to throw out a number, but I do like what you said about, historically, the 80% of your calories coming from fat seems to be a decent starting point, right? And then you can base how you feel and your results, not immediately. In fact, maybe even before that, you said, even before you look at percentages, just eat meat. Like simple might really work,
right?
For you, right? Just
to eat meat, eat what you like. And you really need to just do that for at least 3 months, if not 6.
Okay.
And see how you feel. Like I started losing weight when I started zero carb immediately.
Yeah.
And I was eating pepperoni, all, mayonnaise, chicken, sausages, hot dogs dipped in blue cheese dressing. I was eating all kinds of stuff I don't eat anymore.
So I do feel like when a lot of people start, especially if they're coming from a standard American diet, and they then want to start carnivore, and they're like, okay, so just beef and water, no salt or anything. I'm like, okay, wait. You can probably eat just about anything as long as it's not carbs. Eat meats. You don't have to get freaky strict at first. If you've been eating donuts and now you're going to be eating sausage and bacon and eggs and cheese, you can probably eat all of the zero carb stuff, and still, if you are overweight, you're probably going to drop weight like crazy.
Yeah. And that's a big... in my opinion, it's a mistake for a lot of people to try to go that strict. I couldn't have done it. If somebody would have told me, you just have to do meat and water, I wouldn't be sitting here 12 years later still eating meat and water. You end up that way, but it did take 2 years to get over the variety and the seasonings and the fun food stuff to where it's just fuel now. And so meat and water is pretty much all I eat. But in the beginning, there's no way. And you have to, it's not that important. Eating hot dogs is still better than eating Twinkies. Just let your body get used to it. And then it just gets easier and easier. But if you're allowed to have, the flavors and the textures, it's just so much easier to stay on this diet.
Yes. So if they do that for, say, 3 to 6 months, they've cut out all the carbs, cut out all the sweeteners. They're just eating whatever animal foods they like, living it up for 3 to 6 months. Then they can evaluate and say, okay, well, it's been 5 months. I haven't lost a single pound. Okay. Sometimes this happens. All right.
Yeah.
Especially if somebody doesn't have that much weight to lose, or if they were already keto or something, they might say, I haven't lost a single pound. Now what? This is sort of the advice then for them. You might want to go ahead and go online. Do you have any particular spot where you like for people to, a good place to enter ratios to figure it out?
The online ones are a little more difficult. There's apps. I was looking on my phone, and there's so many macro apps, and they're all pretty easy. You just punch it in, and they give you a pie chart thing, and they're easier than the ones online.
There you go. All right. So try an app and evaluate. And if you're above 80%, you're saying it might be good for a while to just try zero carb, but with less than 80%, maybe the 70 to 80 range.
Yeah.
And if you look at your pie chart on your little free macro app and you're in the 60 to 70 range, you might want to try closer to 80 to see what that does for you.
Yeah. Well, and plus, if you're over 80, you're adding fat. You're putting butter in your coffee, and you're dipping your meat in butter, and just stop that.
Just stop that.
Don't, now we have an opposite problem because of keto.
Yeah.
Here 10 years later, everybody's adding fat to everything.
Yes.
10 years ago, nobody was eating fat. So there is the issue where people are eating too much.
Right.
So you just have to, but you really have to give yourself 6 months of just eat. To me, it's all you can eat meat and cheese and eggs, and just eat it all.
Yeah.
And then, see where you're at. But a lot of people also, biggest problem, they're not eating enough. And you're over analyzing and overthinking everything you put in your mouth. You just need to eat. And in the beginning, we're hungry. I mean, I was used to snacking, every 3 hours, and just snack on meat, hot dogs, pepperoni, dipped in ranch dressing. I mean, just get that out of your system. Get over those cravings, and that can take 3 months. And don't think about, how many calories, or I ate too much. You really can't eat too much. Just get it over with. People are scared to death to gain weight, so they unconsciously or consciously restrict, and that's a huge problem. People just need to get over it. Because what other choice do you have? You can keep starving yourself. You can't do. We've tried them all. Weight Watchers. We've tried every diet on the planet. Just once you get healthy and figure this out, it's a no-brainer. It's easy, and you'll get healthy, and then it's just, unfortunately, takes time.
Yes. When I was gaining, somebody at the old forum said to me, she said, every day you're freaking out more and more. She said, what if you just quit? What are your options? I was like, well, I could go back to eating carbs, which I knew how that went. That got me to 260 pounds. Yeah. I could go back to restricting, which where that got me was no period, no children, feeling lousy, no energy, bad skin, bad hair. That got me in misery. Yeah. There were really no other options. So she said, so stick with what you're doing, try to calm down about it, and just see where it takes you. And where it took me was that weight gain was temporary. Once my body was fed, then it relaxed on what it needed. And now I can just sort of intuitively eat the amount of fat that I want. So when you watched Amber's video, even though your approach needed to be at this point in your life less fat than you were eating, and her approach at this point in her life, she feels that she needs a high amount of fat. You two are actually, and myself, we really are quite in agreement, though, on how to go about this, correct? It's not disagreeing. Yeah.
One thing that I forgot to mention or should mention is when I went to higher protein, I had to eat more food. Okay. Where I used to eat about 2 pounds when I was closer to 80%, I now eat closer to 3 pounds. Okay. So I do eat more food. So you can't say, because people will say, oh, she's eating less fat, she's eating less calories, and that's why she's losing weight. No. It's probably the same. I think I did measure it out once just for the heck of it. and it's the same calories. It's just more of my fuel is coming from protein instead of fat.
Okay.
So when people cut, people who want to try less fat, you're going to be eating more food. And if you're not eating more food, that's going to catch up with you.
Have you personally seen through the years, because you've worked with thousands of people, you have seen people like yourself say they needed less fat, and you have seen people also say that they thrived on more fat? You have seen this at work multiple times?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too. That's why I think it's totally bogus when people act like it's good, that there's a set scientific right answer.
Yeah, no.
That's how many people have you worked with? If you actually think there is a proper ratio on this, I can't even find the proper ratio for myself from meal to meal, right?
Yeah,
like, this morning, I really didn't want a lot of fat when I ate my burgers, and I wasn't wrong. And this afternoon, I may want a ton. Like, that's not right or wrong. I feel like that's a really weird thing to think we can assign a proper ratio for all humans to follow at every meal.
Yeah, I don't think there's a high point. It's really difficult to eat too much fat.
Okay.
But there is, if you do too lean, you'll get sick.
Yes.
You don't want to get below 60%.
Okay.
At least not for any length of time. Because that's not healthy.
No.
It just isn't. I mean, there was a diet called Kimkins back when we started, zero carb, and it was low carb, low fat. And that's just not healthy. People were getting sick, losing their hair, losing their periods. It's just not healthy. You have to have either fat or carbohydrates with protein, because you'll get protein poisoning. You don't want to get below the 60%.
Woo, right before I found you folks, I was really there. I felt so mentally, I mean, I couldn't even complete a little crossword puzzle, not the big New York Times one, like the little ones, without having serious, like, what's the word? What's the word? That's what I was feeling on everything. Like, I couldn't pull things up. My recall was so slow. I needed some fat. Right?
Yeah.
I really did.
You did.
Right. Dana, I knew that just sitting through, I always like to have more than one voice in my ear. Amber is a great one to have in there, but I love having you in this one too. And of course, I'm constantly talking with Charles before every single episode too. I send my videos to you. I want you folks who have been at it longer than I have, who have worked with more people than I have, I always want to know what you think. So just the fact that you watched and took the time to talk to me afterwards, it means a lot to me. And I really think this will be helpful to people. Thank you for keeping it balanced and simple way that can help everybody, a very honest way. And I love that about you, Dana.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great talking with you.
Yeah, I always have fun talking to you too. Thanks, Dana. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay.